Reverse mortgages, another way that some people are funding either senior living or to have caregivers in their home. Savings and investments, so like retirement accounts, 401ks, personal savings, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, all those types of things. Welcome to Aging in Style, the podcast dedicated to celebrating aging and what it takes to do it well. I'm Lori Williams. I'm a certified senior advisor and senior housing expert. In each episode, you'll learn stories of older adults who are thriving in their 70s, 80s, 90s, and in some cases in their hundreds. Whether you're an older adult or the child of an older adult, this podcast is filled with insightful resources, organizations that are doing incredible work, and stories that will inspire you to volunteer, learn, and who knows, maybe even skydive in your golden years. Hi, welcome to Aging in Style. I am so glad y'all have joined in today because I have a really, really important episode to share with you. So last week, the last podcast we did was all about red flags to look for when visiting family over the holidays. Extremely important to have this information and to know what to look for. We see a huge uptick in calls after the holidays, after people go home and see mom and dad or grandma and grandpa and realize, oh my gracious, it's time to get either care in to help them remain independent, or it's time to go to senior living. So along with that, I think it's extremely important to talk about how we pay for these services and or for senior housing options. And I think it's probably one of the most confusing things to talk about. And also, there's a lot of misinformation, and it's one of the things that I always feel so terrible bursting the bubble people have, where they think that Medicare pays for everything. And Medicare will pay for some things, but it does not pay for senior housing. So that's what we're doing on this episode. We are going to break down the different resources, financial ways that we pay for things and what is accepted. So I'm going to start off talking about senior housing. And senior housing, of course, just to kind of reiterate, it's senior apartments, independent living, assisted living, memory care, and residential care homes or group homes. So those are the main types that we have. And within each one, they're all different. So, there's a lot of variety. But when it comes to how they accept payment, they're all the same. So any kind of senior housing, for the most part, I'm going to say like 99%, it is going to be paid for by you, by private pay. So when we say private pay, what does that mean? That is going to mean savings and investments. So like retirement accounts, 401ks, personal savings, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, all those types of things. Social Security benefits. So monthly payments, whatever payment that is that you receive from Social Security based on your work history. Pension plans. If your loved one is lucky enough to have a pension plan, we are not seeing those as often anymore. But if they do have a pension plan, that would be another part of private pay. The big one that we see would be proceeds from the sale of a home. So using the equity from selling their home to help fund senior living. A lot of our seniors have lived in their homes 40, 50 years. And, the good thing is that in most areas and in many cases, people have seen the price of their home go up substantially. So they should, or most, have a very nice chunk of equity in the home. Reverse mortgages, another way that some people are funding either senior living or to have caregivers in their home. And reverse mortgages, they're very specific, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. We have had someone on the podcast before, which we can reference in the show notes if you want to go and listen to that one to learn more about reverse mortgages. Main thing to know is homeowners must be 62 or over. And with this, they convert equity in the home into funds that they can use. Life insurance, cashing out or borrowing against a policy. And then, there's certain ways you can do that. So those are the big ways that people are paying for senior housing. There are some other ways if they are a veteran and they qualify, and there's certain things you have to qualify for. That would be for assisted living or memory care or a residential care home. But they're going to have what we call ADLs, which are activities of daily living that they need help with. That's very, very strict. There's a process to go through for that, but just know that VA aid and attendance may be a program that works for your loved ones. So it's eligible for veterans and their spouses. And there are some other VA programs out there. So just be aware of that. Other government programs, in some cases, Medicaid, which is state and federally funded program for low-income seniors. And that may cover some nursing homes. It's typically, Medicaid is governed by each state. So what they pay for is different state to state. I'm in the state of Texas, and we don't see much Medicaid coverage for assisted living or memory care. It's typically going to be in a nursing home type environment. That may be different in your state, so certainly look into that. And then, of course, Medicare, but Medicare is not, just remember this, is not going to cover housing. And we'll go into a little more what Medicare does cover, but please, if you take nothing from this podcast, Medicare will not cover senior housing. All right, long-term care insurance. Some policies, they will cover assisted living, memory care, in-home care, skilled nursing. Again, a lot of variables with these long-term care policies. They're all a little bit different. You will have to meet their criteria of ADLs needed. Again, those activities of daily living, which mean, I guess I should have said this earlier, that would mean maybe needing help with bathing, dressing, medications. Let's see. Just basically not being able to be left alone, just those basic things you do to live your daily life. And those long-term care policies, there's many of them out there. Like I said, they're all written differently. I'd say the average one that I see nowadays, I used to see ones that, oh my gosh, these older ones that would pay out forever. But I would say for now, we most often will see ones that will pay out for like 3 years. And they have a qualification period of 90 days, which means you have to be able to pay 90 days before it kicks in and starts covering the housing. And again, you would have to qualify for, meet all their criteria and have the activities of daily living before it would start paying. And that would not pay for independent living or a senior apartment. It's going to be assisted living, memory care, residential care home that is licensed, or a nursing home. It also is written in a way, most of them, where it'll pay for in-home care. Another way that people pay for senior living or for housing is financial support from family members. So sometimes their adult kids or other relatives are willing and able to contribute to sort of offset the cost. So that is another way of doing it. And then some other kind of specialized ways that I don't see super often, but are potential things. Sometimes people will get a bridge loan. So maybe they're waiting to sell their house, it's on the market, but they are waiting for it to close and be funded. So they don't have the money, but they have to move into a memory care. So in that case, you might get a bridge loan to cover you until you have access to those resources. And then another way, I do see this pretty often, that the kids will opt to fix up the house once they get mom and dad moved out into senior housing, and they will rent out their home. And then they're able to use that money from the rental to help pay for their parents' senior living. So I hope that helps break it down. I know that's a lot of information I'm throwing at you, but let me just kind of take it specifically into certain things and how they're paid. All right. When we talk about home care, and this gets so confusing because you may also hear it called PAS, personal assistance service, non-medical home care, caregiver. What we are talking about is somebody that comes to your home, whether your home is your house or living in senior living, they can come there too. And that would be someone who's coming to just help you with non-medical tasks. So things like bathing, dressing, preparing meals, light housekeeping, just being there with, say, someone has dementia that can't be left alone. Those types of things that don't require any sort of medical care. It's just all non-medical. That is paid out of pocket. So that Medicare will not cover that because it is non-medical. And so we pay for that in the ways that I mentioned earlier with sale of a house, Social Security, long-term care policy, potentially. There's also a program through the VA that has become pretty popular. I hear a lot about it. So where they are sort of like a preferred vendor with the VA, and, there's certain things, qualifiers you have to look into, but your loved one may qualify for that. And so I've seen up to like 30 hours a week that the VA is covering in the home. But again, I think it's always changing. So I would definitely suggest connecting you with a home care agency that does partner with the VA and has that knowledge. So like I said, home care, non-medical is going to be those private pay options that we just talked about. When we talk about home health care, so here's the difference there, home health, why they make it so difficult and sound alike, I do not know. But, it's confusing for people all the time. And if you feel confused, you're not the only one, I assure you. So home health care would be medical care provided at the home. And again, when I say home, I mean the actual home, or it could be a senior apartment, it could be assisted living, memory care, it could be anywhere. So that would be medical care provided by licensed professionals. So like a nurse, therapist, home health aides. Really popular with home health would be, here's kind of a scenario. Say your dad fell, broke his hip, went to the hospital, went to rehab, and is now back at home. He's going to continue with some physical therapy. So the physical therapist would be coming to the house, or maybe occupational therapist. If there's a stroke or something involved, perhaps speech therapist or music therapy, whatever it may be, that is paid for by your Medicare. So that will not be covered. You don't have to private pay for that, but it will be covered, as I said, by your Medicare. And they have to be eligible for these services and qualified a lot of times, like I said, after a hospital stay or rehab stay, and you need a referral from your physician. Okay, hope that makes sense. You can also private pay. So say your Medicare only covers X number of visits and you really feel like you want to get more therapy for your loved one, you could private pay it as well. Kind of case in point for myself, we are not on Medicare. If you listen to the podcast, my husband had 4 strokes and we've been through every kind of rehab you can imagine, or he has been through. I feel like I have in some ways myself. It's been a lot. Anyhow, we found ourselves in a 3-week period while we were waiting for therapy to be approved through our insurance for him to have the therapy come to our house. And in that 3-week period, I was so concerned about him losing a lot of what he had gained through physical therapy that I hired a friend of mine who's a fantastic physical therapist, hired him to come to the house and do therapy until insurance got their stuff together and we were able to, bring in the therapist that he currently has. So you can always pay out of pocket. It is, it's not cheap, I will tell you that, but in certain situations, for my husband's case in point, I needed him to be able to transfer and I didn't want him to lose any of the gains that he had made. So in some cases, I think if you can, private pay, if you've exhausted Medicare. Hope that makes sense. Okay, hospice care. People always ask about hospice. I know there's a lot of fear about it. We have done podcasts on hospice, and we can definitely put that in the show notes. We can also put in the show notes about physical therapy. And actually, my friend who came and did therapy for my husband, we interviewed him probably a couple of years ago. He's a fantastic guy. Matt Bonider wrote a book about physical therapy and keeping yourself strong and healthy. So we'll put that in the show notes as well. So when we talk about hospice care, that would be end-of-life care. It's focused on comfort, quality of care, typically for those with a prognosis of 6 months or less. There are definitely factors that qualify you for hospice. We will put show notes in the show notes about a hospice interview we did maybe a few months ago with Carol Thomas, and she explained hospice very well. So hospice is paid for by Medicare. So this is where, and I just want to throw this out, this sometimes people will get confused because they're like, well, I want to do home health and continue getting physical therapy for my mom, but she's also hospice appropriate and I want her to have hospice. They're both paid for by Medicare, so you have to choose one. You cannot do both because that would be Medicare fraud or double dipping, I guess we might say. So you cannot get both of those services. So it's one or the other because they are paid for by Medicare. All right. So that's hospice. And as I said, we're going to put a whole bunch of things in the show notes of other podcasts you can go back to and listen to and learn more about the things I've mentioned. But when we get to senior housing, so again, as I said earlier, that's your senior apartment, independent living, assisted living, memory care. When we're saying senior apartment and independent living, that's going to be all private pay. Once we hit the assisted living, memory care, and residential care home, typically people are needing assistance with their activities of daily living, and those other forms of payment we talked about will kick in. So like the long-term care insurance, the veterans benefits, those types of things. So I hope that makes sense in clearing how we pay for senior living. And when someone just kind of throws, it's private pay, well, what the heck does that mean? Now you know there's all these different resources that make up what private pay actually is, not just cash on hand. It's just all of these other things as well. That's what I have for you today. I hope that this has helped. If you have any questions or you need additional information, you can always reach out to me. Go to my website. That's the best way to find me. So it's LoriWilliams-SeniorServices.com. Please share this podcast and last week's about red flags with your friends, family, neighbors, anyone, because I think it's such important information for people to know. So important to make a plan, having this information, a little more understanding of how we pay for senior services and for senior housing. I think that will help you if you have those conversations when you go home to visit with family members, because as I say all the time, it's so important to plan and not just be winging this, because it's super hard to get the call that mom or dad has had a stroke and cannot tell you what their wants are or where their money is. Hope this helps you. And as always, thank you for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.